When my mother-in-law looked me dead in the eye at my own wedding reception and said, "We've trained you well, haven't we?" I finally understood that the past 6 months hadn't been about welcoming me into the family. It had been a test, a game, and I had been playing the role of the perfect, grateful, clueless bride exactly as they'd scripted it. What they didn't know was that I had been watching, learning, and documenting everything. My name is Me, and this is the story of how I pretended to be naive while my husband's family tried to turn me into their servant, and how I made sure they deeply regretted it. Let me take you back to where this all started, 6 months before that wedding reception, when I first met the man who would become my husband. It was a cool October evening when David walked into the community center where I taught pottery classes. I was 50, 8 years old, a widow of 3 years, and I had honestly made my peace with the idea that romantic love might be behind me. My late husband Thomas had been the love of my life, and after he passed from a sudden heart attack, I'd thrown myself into my art, my teaching, and my small circle of friends. I wasn't looking for anyone, but David had a warm smile and kind eyes, and when he signed up for my beginner's pottery class, something just felt easy between us. He was 62, a retired accountant with silver hair and a gentle demeanor. We started talking after class first about clay and glazes, then about books and travel and life. Within 2 months, we were having dinner twice a week. Within 4 months, he proposed. It felt fast, I'll admit, but at our age, you know what you want. You don't have time to waste, I said yes. There's just one thing, David said the night I accepted his proposal, his hand holding mine across the table at our favorite Italian restaurant. My family can be a bit traditional, my mother especially. She's very involved in my life, and my sisters look to her for guidance on everything. I just want you to be prepared. I smiled at him, squeezing his hand. David, I'm 50, 8 years old. I've raised 2 children, run a household, and built a small business. I think I can handle meeting your mother. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes when he said, "I'm sure you can." The first meeting was arranged for a Sunday dinner at his mother's house, a large, immaculate colonial in the wealthy part of town. David had 3 sisters, Patricia, Susan, and Jennifer, all married, all living within 10 minutes of their mother's house. His father had passed away 15 years earlier, and since then, his mother Vivian had been the undisputed matriarch of the family. I dressed carefully that day. A nice but modest navy dress, pearl earrings. Low heels, I brought a homemade apple pie and a bouquet of fresh flowers. David had told me his mother appreciated traditional gestures. Vivian answered the door herself. She was 70, 9 years old, slim and elegant, with perfectly styled white hair and the kind of posture that suggested decades of deportment classes. She looked at me for a long moment before accepting the flowers with a tight smile. How thoughtful, she said, her voice cool. David, take me's coat. Me, the women are in the kitchen. We could use an extra pair of hands. I glanced at David, who gave me an encouraging nod. I followed Vivian through the pristine living room into a large kitchen where 3 women were bustling around. These were David's sisters, and they barely looked up when I entered. "Girls, this is Me," Vivian announced. "Me, you can help Susan with the potatoes. There's an apron on the hook. I'll be honest, it caught me off guard." I'd expected to be introduced to sit and chat, to get to know these women who would be my sisters-in-law. Instead, within 5 minutes of arriving, I was standing at the sink, peeling potatoes while the sisters moved around me with the practiced efficiency of a restaurant kitchen. They talked among themselves, finishing each other's sentences, laughing at inside jokes I couldn't possibly understand. "So Me," Patricia said without looking at me, stirring something on the stove. "David tells us you teach pottery." "Yes, I've been teaching for about 10 years now. I also sell some of my work at a local gallery." How quaint, Susan interrupted, dumping more potatoes into the sink beside me. Make sure you peel those thin. Mother doesn't like waste. I bit back my first response and simply nodded. It was one dinner. I could be gracious for one dinner. But the dinner itself was even stranger. When we finally sat down to eat, I found myself seated between Jennifer and Susan, across from David, who was next to his mother at the head of the table. The conversation flowed around me, but rarely included me. When I tried to contribute, I was often interrupted or the subject was changed. David, Vivian said, patting his hand, I saw Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store. She asked about you. Such a lovely woman. Her daughter Caroline just got divorced, you know. I felt my cheeks flush. But David quickly said, Mother, I'm engaged. You know that, of course, dear. I'm just making conversation. Vivian turned her sharp gaze to me. Me, David mentioned you have children. Yes, 2. My son Marcus is 34. He's a civil engineer in Boston. My daughter Angela is 31. She's a nurse practitioner in Seattle. They're both married with children of their own. How nice that they live so far away. Vivian said, and something in her tone made it sound like a test question. You must not see them very often. We video chat weekly, and I visit several times a year. They're planning to come for the wedding. Of course they are. It's important for children to support their parents' decisions, even when those decisions are surprising. Vivian took a delicate sip of wine. Susan, pass the rolls, please. I felt like I'd been slapped, but I kept my expression neutral and took a bite of my food. Around me, the sisters exchanged glances. David looked uncomfortable but said nothing. After dinner, the men retired to the living room while the women cleaned up. Again, I found myself at the sink, this time washing dishes while the sisters dried and put away. Vivian supervised from a chair at the kitchen table, offering corrections. Me, you need to rinse those better. I can see soap residue. Me, those pots should soak first. Didn't anyone teach you that, me? The crystal goes in the china cabinet, not with the everyday glasses, honestly. I felt my jaw tightening, but I said nothing. I was 50, 8 years old, had run my own household for over 30 years, and I was being treated like an incompetent child. But I told myself to be patient. First meetings were always awkward. Things would get better. They didn't get better. Over the next several months, as David and I planned our small, intimate wedding, the visits to Vivian's house became a regular occurrence every Sunday without fail. And every Sunday, I found myself working in the kitchen, cleaning up after meals, running small errands for Vivian, being corrected on everything from how I folded napkins to how I should wear my hair. David prefers women with longer hair. Vivian mentioned one day as I stood at her kitchen sink, washing her lunch dishes. Perhaps you should grow yours out. David's never mentioned it. I replied, keeping my voice even. Well, he wouldn't, would he? He's too polite, but a wife should want to please her husband. The sisters would nod along with their mother's observations, occasionally adding their own suggestions. I should learn to make David's favorite pot roast. I should understand that family always comes first, and David's family had certain expectations. I should be grateful that they were taking the time to help me understand how things worked in their family. And here's the thing, I played along. I said yes, of course, and thank you for telling me. And I appreciate the guidance. I asked questions about family traditions and David's preferences. I took notes when Vivian shared her recipes. I accepted every correction with a smile, but what they didn't know was that I was also watching. Really watching. I noticed how David's sisters never contradicted their mother, even when Vivian was clearly being unreasonable. I noticed how their husbands sat silently in the living room, trained to stay out of family matters. I noticed that every Sunday, without fail, one of the sisters would mention something she needed: a ride to the airport, help moving furniture, someone to watch her kids. And David would immediately volunteer, not ask me first, just volunteer us both. I noticed the way Vivian kept a small leather notebook in the kitchen, and one day when she left the room, I glimpsed inside it. There were lists of tasks assigned to different people with check marks and comments. David, fix Patricia's garage door, done. Susan, need new vacuum, David, purchasing. Jennifer, bathroom remodel, David to provide labor. David, I was beginning to realize, was his mother's handyman, his sister's hall help, and the family's general resource. And I was expected to fall in line. But I was also noticing something else. I was noticing financial things. David had told me he was comfortable but not wealthy. He'd had a good career, had a nice pension, owned his home outright. But I couldn't help but notice that he seemed to be funding a lot of his family's lifestyle. When Patricia mentioned she was worried about her daughter's college tuition, David wrote a check. When Susan's husband lost his job, David covered their mortgage for 3 months. When Jennifer wanted to remodel her kitchen, David provided the contractor and paid for half the materials. That's just what family does. David said when I gently asked about it one evening, "My mother raised us to take care of each other." "Of course," I said, "it's generous of you. I just want to make sure you're not overextending yourself." "Don't worry about it, me. I've got it handled, but I did worry about it. Because we were about to get married, and while we'd agreed to keep our finances mostly separate, we were both established adults with our own assets. I needed to understand what I was walking into. So I did something I'm not entirely proud of, but don't regret. I hired a private investigator. His name was Robert Chen, a professional recommended by a friend who'd gone through a difficult divorce. I met him at a coffee shop 3 months before my wedding. I'm not looking for proof of cheating. I explained, my hands wrapped around my coffee cup. I'm looking for financial information. My fiancé is very generous with his family, and I'm starting to wonder if there's more to the story. I just want to protect myself. Robert was a small, neat man with intelligent eyes. You'd be surprised how often I hear that from people your age getting remarried. What specifically do you want to know? Everything. Bank accounts, investments, debts, any regular payments or transfers. And I want to know about his mother and sister's finances too. Are they genuinely needing help, or are they taking advantage? That's doable. I'll need about 3 weeks. I gave him the retainer check and left feeling both guilty and relieved. I loved David, I truly did, but I hadn't survived 60 years on this planet by being stupid, and something in my gut was telling me that this family had a system, and I was being groomed to be part of it. 2 weeks later, Robert called me. "We need to meet." This is more complicated than I expected. The folder Robert handed me across that same coffee shop table was thick. I opened it with trembling hands. "Your fiancé," Robert began, "has given his mother and sisters approximately $340,000 over the past 10 years. That's documented transfers, checks, and confirmed cash payments. There's probably more that isn't traceable." I felt my breath catch. $340,000. Yes, and here's where it gets interesting. His mother owns her home outright. It's worth about $800,000. She has a pension from her late husband, Social Security, and investments worth approximately $600,000. She is not by any stretch of the imagination in need of financial support. I stared at the papers in front of me. Bank statements, property records, investment accounts, all neatly highlighted and annotated. His sisters, Robert continued, are all married to men with good incomes. Patricia's husband is a surgeon. Susan's husband worked in tech until he was laid off, but he received a substantial severance package and has since started his own consulting business. Jennifer's husband is a partner at a law firm. None of these families are struggling financially. Then why? Because your fiancé was trained to provide for them. Look at this. Robert pulled out a copy of a will, David's father's will. When his father died 15 years ago, David was the executor and the primary beneficiary. His father left him the bulk of his estate, about $500,000, with the understanding that David would care for his mother and sisters as needed. The sisters each received $50,000. The mother got the house and her husband's pension. I read through the will, my mind racing. So David's father put him in charge? Exactly. And Vivian has been wielding that responsibility like a weapon ever since. Look at these. Robert spread out a series of emails and text messages. I was able to access some of David's email legally through a database search that pulled up messages he'd sent to public forums and that were archived. These are messages between David and his mother over the years. I read them with growing horror. David, Patricia needs help with the down payment on her new car. I know you'll want to help your sister. David, Susan's worried about the roof. You know your father would want you to take care of this. David, Jennifer's children need so much for school. Family comes first, every request phrased not as a request but as a given, not can you help, but you'll want to help. Or you know what you need to do. She's been manipulating him for 15 years. I said slowly, yes. And now you're entering the picture. A woman with her own assets, her own income, her own life. You're a threat to the system they've built. That's why they've been treating me like this. The Sunday dinners, the tasks, the constant corrections. They're training you, Robert confirmed. Training you to defer to Vivian, to put David's family first, to be available for their needs. And if you marry David without a very solid prenuptial agreement, you'll be giving them legal access to your assets as well. I sat back, my mind reeling. My pottery business wasn't huge, but it was profitable. I owned my home, a lovely 3-bedroom craftsman that Thomas and I had bought 30 years ago, and that was now worth about $450,000. I had savings, investments, and a pension from my years teaching in the public school system before I'd gone independent. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable, secure, and I was about to marry into a family that saw love as a transaction and support as an obligation. What do you recommend? I asked Robert. First, a very strong prenuptial agreement. Second, a serious conversation with your fiancé. Say about boundaries and financial independence. Third, he paused. You need to decide if you can marry into this family knowing what you know now. I took the folder home and spent the night reading through every page. Bank statements showing regular transfers, property records showing what everyone actually owned, background checks revealing the true financial status of each family member. By the time the sun rose, I had made my decision. I was going to marry David, but I was going to do it on my terms, and I was going to make absolutely certain that his family understood I was not the naive, grateful, pliable woman they thought I was. But I wasn't ready to reveal my hand yet. So I continued playing my role. The next Sunday, I arrived at Vivian's house with a homemade coffee cake and a smile. I helped in the kitchen, washed the dishes, accepted corrections on how I was drying the wine glasses, but this time I was listening differently. I was paying attention to the specific phrasing, the subtle manipulations, the way information was shared or withheld. Me. Patricia said as we cleared the table, David mentioned you're selling your house after the wedding. I hadn't mentioned anything of the sort because it wasn't true. Oh, we haven't decided anything definite yet. Well, you'll want to, won't you? David's house is much larger. And it's closer to family. Patricia smiled at me in a way that didn't reach her eyes. Mother thinks it makes the most sense. I'll certainly discuss it with David, I said neutrally. Later, in the car on the way home, I asked David about it. Your sister seems to think we've decided I'm selling my house. Did you tell her that? David looked uncomfortable. My mother mentioned it might make sense. Your house is smaller, and mine is closer to the family. It just seemed logical. Did it occur to you to discuss this with me first? I thought we had discussed it. Didn't we? We hadn't. Not once. This was what I was dealing with, decisions being made around me. Assumptions being presented as agreements, my life being planned by people who barely knew me. David, I said carefully, I need you to hear me. I love you. I want to marry you. But I am not selling my house unless we make that decision together. After a genuine discussion where both of our opinions matter equally. And I need you to stop letting your mother and sisters make assumptions about my life. He was quiet for a long moment. You're right, I'm sorry. I'm so used to everyone sharing everything in my family, I sometimes forget that you're not, that we need to, that I'm a separate person with my own thoughts and rights. I said it gently but firmly. Yes, I'm sorry, me, I'll do better. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But I also knew that 40 years of family training wouldn't be undone by one conversation in a car. That week, I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Lisa Rodriguez, who specialized in prenuptial agreements for older couples. Smart, she said when I explained the situation. Too many people think prenups are unromantic, but at your age, they're just practical. You've both built lives and assets. You should both protect them. I want to make sure that what's mine stays mine, I explained, and I want to make sure I'm not legally responsible for David's financial gifts to his family. Absolutely doable. Let me draft something, and then we'll sit down with you and David together to review it. When I told David we needed a prenup, I expected resistance, but he surprised me, of course. He said immediately, "Me, I should have suggested it myself. We're both bringing assets into this marriage. We should both protect them. Your family might not like it. I warned. My family doesn't need to know about it. It's between us." That should have been my first clue that David understood on some level exactly how his family operated. He knew they'd interfere. He knew they'd have opinions. He just wasn't willing to confront them about it. The prenup was signed 3 weeks before the wedding. It was comprehensive. Our assets remained separate. Any gifts or loans to family members would come from individual accounts, not joint ones. My house, my business, my investments, all protected. David's pension, his house, his savings, all protected. If either of us died, our individual assets would go to our own children, not to the surviving spouse, except for one specific joint account we'd created for household expenses. Lisa looked it over with satisfaction. This is airtight, you're protected. But what I hadn't told David or Lisa was that I'd also done something else. I'd revised my own will to make my daughter Angela the executor, with explicit instructions that if I died within 5 years of marrying David, she was to immediately audit all my accounts and investigate any suspicious financial activity. I'd given her a sealed envelope with Robert Chen's report and a letter explaining everything I'd learned about David's family, just in case. I told Angela over video chat, "Something feels wrong about how this family operates, and I want to make sure you're protected if anything happens to me." "Mom, are you sure you should marry him if you feel this way?" Angela's face on the screen was creased with worry. "I love him, honey, and I think he loves me. He's just trapped in a very unhealthy family dynamic. I'm hoping that with clear boundaries and legal protections we can build something good together. I hope you're right, Mom, but I'm keeping this envelope somewhere very safe." The wedding was set for a Saturday in early May, at a lovely small venue with a garden. Just 40 guests, mostly David's family and my closest friends, plus Angela and Marcus and their families flying in for the occasion. We'd kept it simple, a short ceremony, nice dinner, cake and champagne. The week before the wedding, Vivian called me directly for the first time. Usually, all communication went through David. "Me, dear," she said, her voice honey. "Sweet, I wanted to discuss the wedding with you. Of course, Vivian. What's on your mind?" "Well, I've been thinking about the seating arrangements, of course, as the groom's mother. I'll sit in the front row with my daughters. I assume your children will sit with the general guests." I felt my spine stiffen. "Actually, Angela and Marcus will be sitting in the front row as well. They're my family." "Oh, but dear, that's not traditional. The groom's family sits on one side, the bride's on the other, and the parents sit in front, since you don't have parents in attendance. My children are my immediate family, Vivian. They'll be in the front row." There was a long pause. "I see. Well, we'll discuss it with David." "There's nothing to discuss. It's already arranged." Another pause. Then, in a colder voice, "I think we need to have a frank conversation. You're marrying into this family, and you need to understand how we do things. We're very close. We support each other. We put family first. I'm not sure you understand what that means yet. I understand perfectly, I said calmly. What I'm not sure you understand is that I'm not a child who needs instruction. I'm a 58-year-old woman with my own family, my own life, and my own standards. I'm marrying David because I love him, not because I'm looking for a new mother or a new set of sisters. I'm happy to be part of family gatherings and to support David in his relationships with you. But I'm not going to be trained, corrected, or managed. The silence on the other end of the phone was arctic. Finally, Vivian said, I see. Well, I suppose we'll see how things work out. She hung up. I sat there, my hand shaking slightly as I put down the phone. I had just declared war and I knew it, but I also knew I couldn't start my marriage from a position of submission. If I gave in now, I'd be giving in forever. That evening, David called me, his voice strained. My mother is very upset. She says you were disrespectful to her. I told her my children would sit in the front row at my wedding. That's not disrespectful, that's a simple fact. She feels like you're not willing to compromise. David, I've been compromising for 6 months. I've spent every Sunday in your mother's kitchen. I've accepted her corrections and her suggestions and her opinions on everything from my hair to my cooking. But I will not compromise on my children's place at my wedding. If that's a problem for you, we need to talk about it now. He was quiet for a long moment. You're right, I'm sorry. Your children should absolutely sit in the front row. I'll talk to my mother, thank you. But I knew the conversation wouldn't end there. And I was right. The wedding day arrived, sunny and beautiful. Angela and Marcus were there with their families, and it felt wonderful to hug them, to have them nearby. They'd met David several times via video chat and once in person, and they liked him, but they were also concerned. Mom, are you absolutely sure? Marcus asked me the morning of the wedding as we had coffee together in my kitchen. I'm sure. I told him. David is a good man. His family is complicated, but I can handle it. You've always been able to handle anything. Angela said, squeezing my hand. Just promise us you'll call if you need anything. Anything at all, I promise. The ceremony was lovely. David and I exchanged vows in the garden, surrounded by spring flowers. Angela and Marcus sat in the front row, along with Vivian and David's sisters. Vivian's expression was tight, but she was polite. It was at the reception, during dinner, that things came to a head. I was sitting at the head table with David, making conversation with my children and their spouses, when Vivian approached. She leaned down between David and me, her hand on my shoulder, and said in a voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, We've trained you well, haven't we? I felt David stiffen beside me. I felt Angela's eyes snap to her grandmother-in-law, and I felt something inside me go very, very still. I turned to look at Vivian, meeting her eyes directly. Excuse me, the past 6 months, Vivian said, smiling that cold smile. We've taught you how this family works. You've learned to help in the kitchen, to be useful, to understand your place. You've been a good student. The tables around us had gone quiet. People were listening. My place, I repeated softly, of course, as David's wife, you're part of this family now. That means you understand that family comes first. David's family. We take care of each other, and that means you take care of us. She patted my shoulder. Don't worry, dear. We'll continue to guide you. I looked at David. He was staring at his plate, his face red, saying nothing. I looked at my children. Angela's mouth was open in shock. Marcus looked furious. I looked back at Vivian and made my decision. Could you excuse me for just a moment? I said pleasantly, I need to make a quick announcement. I stood up, smoothed down my dress, and walked to where the DJ was set up. Excuse me, could I borrow your microphone for just a moment? The young man handed it over, looking uncertain. I turned to face the reception, to face all these people, David's family, my friends, my children. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you're here to celebrate with us. But before we continue with the evening, I need to address something. David was staring at me now, his eyes wide. 6 months ago, I met David's wonderful family for the first time. His mother, Vivian, his sisters Patricia, Susan, and Jennifer. They welcomed me into their home, and we've spent a lot of time together since then. And during that time, I've learned a great deal about how this family operates. Vivian's smile had frozen on her face. I've learned that this family believes in certain roles. They believe that David should financially support his mother and sisters, despite the fact that they're all quite comfortable financially. They believe that I should be grateful for the opportunity to serve them, to cook, clean, and make myself useful in their homes. They believe that by marrying David, I'm agreeing to put his family's needs ahead of my own, my children's, and even our marriage. The room was dead silent now. But here's what I need everyone in this room to understand, especially you, Vivian. I am 58 years old. I have raised 2 brilliant, successful children. I have built a thriving business. I own my own home. I have my own money, my own life, and my own boundaries. I did not marry David to become his family's servant or his mother's project. I married him because I love him. I turned to look at David. And because I believe he's capable of being a true partner to me, not just an extension of his mother's will, I turned back to the crowd. So let me be very clear about what the boundaries of this marriage are going to be. My house remains mine. My business remains mine. My children are my immediate family, and they will always be treated with the same respect and priority as David's family. David and I will make decisions together as equal partners, not under the direction of his mother. And any financial gifts to any family member will be decided by both of us from our individual accounts, not from shared funds. Patricia stood up. This is completely inappropriate. Sit down, Patricia. I said firmly. I'm not finished. For 6 months I have smiled and nodded while your family tried to train me. I peeled potatoes while you all stood around gossiping about me. I accepted corrections on how I fold towels and criticism of my hair. I watched while David wrote check after check to fund your lifestyles, and I said nothing because I was observing, I was learning, and I was documenting. I pulled a small envelope from where I'd tucked it into my dress. This envelope contains copies of bank statements, financial records, and a complete accounting of every dollar David has given this family over the past 10 years. $340,000 to be exact, given to people who don't need it, demanded by people who feel entitled to it. Vivian's face had gone pale. I've also signed a prenuptial agreement that protects both my assets and David's. And I've made arrangements to ensure that if anything suspicious happens to me or my finances, my children have the resources to investigate immediately. I looked around the room at the shocked faces. Now, some of you might think I'm being harsh. Some of you might think I'm being unfair. But let me ask you this. Would any of you accept being treated the way I've been treated? Would any of you smile while someone tried to make you subservient in your own marriage? No one spoke. I didn't think so. I handed the microphone back to the DJ. Now, let's enjoy the rest of this reception. There's cake. I walked back to my seat. David was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shock, certainly, but also something else, maybe relief. Vivian, meanwhile, had turned on her heel and was marching toward the exit, her daughters scrambling after her. Angela leaned over to me. Mom, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen. Marcus raised his glass to me, who takes no shit. David finally spoke, his voice low. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, I told him. But we will be having a very long conversation tomorrow about what kind of marriage we're going to have. I want the kind where you feel like an equal, he said quietly. I want the kind where I support you, not just you supporting everyone else. I'm so sorry, I've been letting this happen for so long. I didn't even see how bad it had gotten. Well, now you see it. The question is, what are you going to do about it? He took my hand. Whatever it takes to make this right. The days after the wedding were interesting, to say the least. Vivian called David 17 times in the first 24 hours. He didn't answer. Patricia sent a long email about how I'd humiliated the family. David deleted it. Susan showed up at his house, our house now, I supposed, and demanded to speak with him. He told her we'd talk when everyone had calmed down, then closed the door. On the third day after the wedding, David and I sat down at the kitchen table with coffee and had the conversation we should have had months earlier. My father told me I needed to take care of everyone, David said, his hands wrapped around his mug. He said it was my responsibility as the only son. And my mother reinforced that message every single day after he died. If I hesitated, if I questioned, she'd say things like, "Your father would be so disappointed," or "I guess I raised you wrong." And my sisters, they learned the same pattern. They learned that asking David for help wasn't really asking, it was just reminding me of my duty. "But you must have known it wasn't healthy," I said gently. I knew it was too much, that I was giving too much, that they were taking advantage, but every time I tried to pull back, the guilt was overwhelming. And they're very good at wielding guilt, they're experts, I know they are. I watched them do it to you dozens of times. He looked at me with something like wonder. "You saw it all, didn't you? You were watching and documenting while pretending to be the naive new girlfriend." "I wasn't going to walk into a trap blind," I said. "I'm too old for that. What happens now? Now we set boundaries. Real ones, no more blank checks to your family. No more emergencies that turn out to be wants instead of needs. No more Sunday dinners unless we both want to go. No more volunteering me for tasks without asking. And absolutely no more allowing your mother to speak to me or treat me the way she has been. She's not going to like that. I don't need her to like it. I need you to enforce it." David took a deep breath. "Okay, let's start with a letter. I'll write to all of them, clearly explaining the new boundaries." "Good. I'll help you draft it." The letter was sent that week. It was polite but firm. David explained that he loved his family but that his marriage had to come first. He explained that future financial support would be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, with me's input, and that the days of automatic bailouts were over. He explained that family gatherings would be attended when invited and when both he and me were available, not as a mandatory weekly obligation. And he explained that me was to be treated with respect, or we would not be present at all. The response was immediate and explosive. Vivian called David crying, saying he was abandoning her in her old age. Patricia sent an email calling me a manipulative gold digger who'd turned her brother against his family. Susan left a voicemail saying we were both going to regret this. Jennifer, interestingly, said nothing. David held firm. "I love you all," he told his mother when she called for the third time that day. "But I'm married now, and me is my priority. These boundaries aren't negotiable." "Then you're choosing her over your own family," Vivian said coldly. "No, I'm choosing to have a healthy marriage. There's a difference." She hung up on him. For 2 months, we heard nothing from his family. No calls, no emails, no contact. David was hurt, but also, I think, relieved. We spent those months getting to know each other without the constant pressure of family obligations. We took a belated honeymoon to the coast. We set up our household routines. We talked about what we wanted our life together to look like. And slowly, David started to realize how much of his life had been consumed by his family's demands. How many weekends he'd spent doing repairs on his sister's houses instead of pursuing his own interests. How much money he'd given away instead of saving for his own retirement. How much emotional energy he'd spent managing his mother's moods instead of building his own happiness. "I think I've been stuck for 20 years. He told me one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Just frozen in place, trying to be the son my father wanted me to be. "You can't live your father's expectations forever," I said. "At some point, you have to choose your own life. I'm choosing it now." "With you." It was Jennifer who broke the silence first. She called David and asked if she could come talk to us, just her, without the rest of the family. David agreed, and she came over on a Tuesday evening. Jennifer was the youngest of the sisters, and I'd always sensed she was the least comfortable with the family dynamics. She sat in our living room, coffee cup in hand, and surprised us both. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "I'm sorry for how we treated you, Me. You were right about all of it. We did treat you like a servant. We did expect you to just fall in line, and we do take advantage of David." David looked stunned. "Jennifer, let me finish. I've been thinking about what you said at the wedding and about the letter you sent. And I realize that I've been just as trapped as you, David. We all have. Mother taught us that asking David for help was just what you did, that he owed us, that it was his job to take care of us. And I never questioned it because that's just how things were. You're not trapped anymore," I said gently. "You can make different choices. I'm trying to. I told Mother I didn't agree with cutting you off. I told her that Me was right to set boundaries and that we all owed you an apology. She didn't take it well." "How not well?" David asked warily. "She told me I was being disloyal and that if I sided with you, I was no longer her daughter." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, and I realized that was okay. "Because I don't want to be that kind of daughter anymore. I don't want to be someone who uses people and calls it family love." We talked for 2 more hours that evening. Jennifer apologized for specific things, comments she'd made, times she'd been dismissive, ways she'd supported her mother's treatment of Me. She asked questions about healthy boundaries and how to rebuild relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. When she left, David sat quietly for a long time. "Do you think the others will come around?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Some people are too invested in the system to let it go, but Jennifer did. That's something." Over the next year, here's what happened. Jennifer maintained contact with us and started setting her own boundaries with Vivian. She stopped asking David for financial help and started making her own decisions without seeking her mother's approval. Vivian was furious, but Jennifer held firm. She and I became friendly, not close, maybe, but genuinely kind to each other. Susan eventually reached out with a stiff, awkward apology. She admitted that she'd been uncomfortable with how Me was treated, but had gone along with it because that's what the family expected. She and David rebuilt a cordial but distant relationship. She stopped asking for money. Patricia never apologized. She remained firmly aligned with Vivian and continued to insist that David had betrayed the family. David mourned that relationship but accepted it. Vivian herself remained cold and distant. We saw her twice in that first year, once at a family funeral, once at Jennifer's daughter's graduation. She was polite but glacial. She made it clear she felt David had chosen wrong and that I had destroyed her family. David tried several times to have a real conversation with her about building a healthier relationship. She refused. "She's not going to change." I told him after the 3rd attempt, "She's too invested in being the victim of your betrayal. You have to accept that. I know, it just hurts. Of course it hurts. She's your mother, but you can't set yourself on fire to keep her warm. That's not love, that's self-destruction." As for David and Me, our marriage grew stronger. Without the constant pressure of his family's demands, David started to relax, to rediscover hobbies he'd abandoned, to make plans based on what he wanted instead of what was expected of him. He joined a woodworking club. He started volunteering at a community center. He traveled with me to visit my children and got to know his grandchildren, and me. I kept teaching pottery, kept running my business, kept living my life on my own terms, except now I had a partner who truly saw me as an equal. We shared household responsibilities, made decisions together, supported each other's goals and dreams. Looking back now, 3 years after that wedding reception, I understand something important. The way David's family treated me wasn't personal. It wasn't really about me at all. It was about preserving a system that benefited them. A system where David was the reliable provider, the fixer, the one who sacrificed so they didn't have to. I was a threat to that system because I refused to participate in it, and I encouraged David to see it for what it was. When I pretended to be the clueless, grateful bride, I wasn't being dishonest. I was being strategic. I was giving them enough rope to hang themselves with, documenting their behavior and preparing for the moment when I'd need to draw a line in the sand. If I'd confronted them earlier, before I had proof and legal protection, they would have convinced David I was the problem, that I was unreasonable, demanding, trying to isolate him from his loving family. But by the time I made my stand, I had everything I needed. Documentation of their financial exploitation, a prenup protecting my assets, witnesses who'd seen their treatment of me, and most importantly, David's own growing awareness that something wasn't right. I learned that silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. Sometimes watching and waiting is the strongest move you can make. I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. David's family had blood, but they didn't have the rest of it. They had obligation, but not love. And once David understood the difference, he was able to make better choices. I learned that you can't change people who don't want to change. Vivian will probably go to her grave believing she was the wronged party in this story, that her ungrateful son chose a manipulative outsider over his own mother. I can't control that. I can only control my own boundaries and my own integrity. And I learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. At 58, I could have easily told myself I was too old to make waves, that I should just go along to get along, that peace at any price was worth it, but I didn't. I drew the line, and my life is better for it. If you're going through something similar, if you're dealing with a partner, family that treats you as less than, that demands your submission, that expects you to sacrifice yourself on the altar of family loyalty, know this: you don't have to accept it. You don't have to smile and nod while people disrespect you. You don't have to let anyone train you, manage you, or diminish you, but be smart about it. Document what's happening. Protect yourself legally and financially, build your case, and when you're ready, draw your line clearly and firmly. You might lose some relationships in the process, but the relationships you lose are the ones that were never healthy to begin with, and you'll keep the ones that matter, the ones built on genuine love and mutual respect, like my relationship with David, which is stronger now than I ever imagined it could be. Like my relationship with Jennifer, who chose growth over loyalty to a toxic system. Like my relationships with my own children, who saw their mother stand up for herself and learned that lesson for their own lives. I'm 61 now, David is 65. We're building a life together that belongs to us, not to his mother's expectations or his family's demands. We travel when we want. We volunteer together. We have Sunday dinners at our own house, sometimes just the two of us, sometimes with Jennifer and her family, sometimes with my kids when they visit. We make decisions together, as partners, as equals, and when people ask me about my wedding, I smile and tell them it was the day I stopped pretending and started living as exactly who I am, a woman who knows her worth, a woman who won't be trained, a woman who chose love but on her own terms. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. And if you're facing something similar, remember, you are stronger than you know. You don't have to accept being less than. You don't have to earn your place in your own marriage. You are already enough. Remember, every story has a lesson and yours might be just beginning. Stand firm, set your boundaries, protect yourself, and never, ever let anyone make you feel small. This is me reminding you that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to play a role that was written for you by someone else. Write your own story instead. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Have you had to set boundaries with family? Have you had to choose yourself when someone you loved was taking advantage? You're not alone in this. So many of us have walked this road. Remember, every story has a lesson, and yours might be just beginning. But whatever chapter you're in, know this: you are valuable, you are worthy. And you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Take care of yourselves. Until next time, this is me.